Well, it looks like we're just about at time to get going. So I'll quickly introduce the panel and then I'll hand it over to Ivan to moderate. So thank you all so much for being here. This is a panel on tribal government implementation and articulations of traditional ecological knowledge. Thank you all panelists so much for being here, and thank you for everyone listening in to the webinar. This panel will include short presentations of TEK governance by each speaker, followed by a discussion of the various TEK applications from tribal governance. And then at the end, at around 2:40, we'll open up the floor for questions. So feel free to put those in the chat Q&A as we go. And then Ivan will moderate that question and answer session at the end, and we'll wrap up then at 2:55. So Ivan, I will turn it over to you to introduce the panel and moderate the discussion.
All right, perfect. Thank you, everyone. It's a little stormy down here in Sacramento. It's cold weather today, but it's good to see everybody and good to be on this panel. This panel kind of came about after a few talks between James Sarmento, myself, and everybody else on the panel. And we really wanted to provide a perspective on how TEK is actually applied and used by tribal governments, because it's used in some way, shape, or form, but there's different kind of ways it comes about. So kind of from here, we'll go, and I've sent questions out to the panelists to discuss and talk. So from here, I'd like to go over to James Sarmento to give his to introduce himself, to introduce his history, and then talk about his TEK. My history is I am the Buena Vista Rancheria of Miwok Indians TIPO and Cultural Resource Director. I oversee TEK, which is a department in our tribal government that we work towards and continuously implement throughout the legal structure and the effectiveness of all projects, coordination with facilities, natural resource department. And that's just my brief background. So I will continually introduce everybody, but James can take it away from here.
All right, so hi, I guess I'll go. Kasiyami ma ichikotuta yapu kaskekwa James. Hi, how are you all doing? My name is James. Recognize that you all are probably in Oregon, which I'm actually Shasta from Northern California, Southern Oregon. So just wanted to do a shout out to Shasta people up there for sure. So my role, so I work as the Executive Director of Cultural Resources Division with the Shingle Springs Band of Miwok Indians. Malissa Tayaba, who is not on the call right now, I'll kind of briefly introduce her as well, is the TEK Director at Shingle Springs and also the Chairwoman for the tribe. So just wanted to know that she's extremely busy, so I'm not sure if she's going to be able to make it on the call or not, but in terms of the TEK department here, so the way that the Cultural Resources Division is made up, it's made up of about 4 departments, site protection being one. That was early on, that was the tribe's main focus, was protecting those cultural resources. It moved into being able to protect other avenues, including language. So it's got a language department. It's got the Traditional Ecological Knowledge department, which Melissa is the director of, and then an exhibits and collections department. So all of those 4 departments work to implement the sort of the cultural resources scope within the larger division. So they're all focused on that. But in terms of my own experience, I'm certainly not from the community here, but I'm from Northern California, Southern Oregon, as I said. In terms of that, I did not grow up in the community, but I was often up there during the summers. And my own experience was just really doing stuff with my grandfather during the summers. And then I think later on in life, I moved on to doing archaeological work myself and focused on being a good student, working on archaeology, did my undergrad in archaeology, and then went on to do sort of shifted gears and focused on language myself. So I moved to working on language, and that became sort of, those two like became my big pillars in life, and in terms of focusing on that, which I see like TEK as kind of, it encompasses all of those spaces. And really, I mean, I think that that's why many of us are here and talking about it. So I'll stop there because I will just go on forever. Take the floor, Ivan.
All right, thank you, James. And then we have Robert, if you can take it away.
Hekate mai okate kemtil. Wechen Robert Geary lembak Habematolel atawal kit. How are you today? My name is Robert Geary. I'm from Alem, the village of Alem, which is a little south of where I'm actually working. In my introduction, I actually said I'm from Alem, but I work for Habematolel. From the southeastern Pomo tribe, I work for the eastern Pomo tribe, two different tribes, two different languages. And so, but we're still here located in Clear Lake, California. So I'm, I'm the Habematolel's Director of Cultural Resources. I'm also the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer. So, you know, really kind of been doing a lot of this work, a lot of different cultural work for a very long time. I'm also one of the, in the area, one of the ceremonial roundhouse leaders for our ceremonies. And I also sat on the curatorial team for the Tavernier exhibition at the New York Met, and also for the San Francisco de Young Museum for a painting that was done in the 1870s of our village. So been doing language work for about 20 years. You know, basically my aunt and myself are the only speakers that we have left within the communities, or within our community. The only time we really get together is now is kind of like funerals, which is unfortunate. But I've been doing a lot of language work for a very long time, created our orthography, you know, just trying to get a system down, trying to hopefully at one point get a nice dictionary completed, creative curriculum, done classes, kind of done all of that. And being, you know, also one of the cultural leaders from my community, making sure that the ceremonies, the rules, how those things were conducted, and, you know, just the continuance, you know, of that knowledge that was passed down to me. I was fortunate enough to be raised with my grandparents and then their generation. So my aunts and my uncles of the same generation. A lot of the archival material, I'll see, you know, all my family members that are in there that have left a lot of that cultural knowledge. So we've been doing that. And like I said, you know, site protection. At where I'm at currently, you know, we've just started our site protection department about 2 years ago. The tribe is looking at creating, you know, the language department. And it's like, you know, Dr. Sarmento was talking earlier that, you know, we wanted to do a language program. You know, we're wanting to do, you know, like site protection. We got up and running. They're talking about doing a tribal museum for the fact that, you know, it seems like everyone else is telling our story but us. So being able to have a facility to do it in a manner that, you know, the tribe feels, you know, comfortable with the traditional and the cultural knowledge, you know, to be able to create something that people really get a better understanding of the community. And then also a cultural and historical component to the education department that they also have here. So a lot of that, you know, that tech information or that tech component is really falls into each one of those, just as, you know, we were talking about earlier. And so we're just really fortunate enough to be able to have a lot of material, just in making sure that, you know, we not only have the archival material, we also have all the archaeological data that we need to help us with those determinations of old village sites. We've also, you know, do and conduct, you know, interviews with elders to get all of the information as far as, you know, important gathering sites, sacred sites, you know, things that help us make our determinations for projects that we get notifications for to be able to help protect and preserve those locations within the tribe's ancestral territory. So other than that, that's it. That's me. Oh.
Thank you, Robert. And then up next, we have Petee Rameriz. Take it away, Petee.
Mijuxus, Kani Pitalo, Kani Laxum, his name, Samano Me-Wuk. Say hello, my name is Petee. I come from up in the mountains. My village was Samano, was the last village that we lived on before we got moved to Sheep Ranch Rancheria in Calaveras County. I worked with Shingle Springs for a little over a year now on the tech department, but together we've been collaborating. We're trying to figure it out like 15, 20 years or so. We've been trying to work together as far as ceremonies go to bring it back to our villages. Our tribes are roundhouse people, so we have a lot of similarities in our language, not language, but in the ceremonies. The tribe I work for is Miwok, and we do have a lot more similarities than differences from out-of-state tribes. So we've been able to collaborate together to bring back ceremonies that were laying asleep for a while, and been able to bring songs back and do a lot for our community. Like I said, I come from Calaveras County. My family's on up in the hills. We spent most of our time up in the mountains, and that's where we still go to this day to hold our ceremonies. We have a couple of sites, our village sites that we still utilize, which is Wakalu Hepu. It was a village up on the Stanislaus River. That was where we held our summer ceremonies when it was too hot down in the valley in Vallecito. We would go up in the higher mountains, and then when it got too cold up there, we try to burn it out and go back down to Calaveras County, Vallecito, Angels Camp area. I'm also one of the caretakers of my tribe's ceremonies. I help carry our feathers, help sing songs, and teach our youth, or not even the youth, help teach our tribe, because we try to remember that a lot of people weren't raised around ceremony. We were taken away from it and taught other things. And so we encourage people within our tribes to relate, even if you're in your 40s or 50s and you want to now devote your life to ceremony. We open that door. So we don't just teach the kids, we open the door to everybody. It's the way we're taught ceremonies for everybody. When they talk about tech work, it's a new term for us, because the things that encompass tech are things that we were just taught to do. Certain times a year you gather medicine, certain times a year you let it stay asleep, and those are just things that were taught to us. Certain times a year you do certain dances, you give thanks, and when you see certain
It looks like we lost Petee there for a second. So if he's coming back. Lost you for a second.
Yeah, I'm out in the field. You can see I got a big storm coming back here, so yeah, I'm gonna have that signal. But yeah, I just do to help out with this panel today. I'm definitely willing to.
All right. Thank you, Petee, for that. As everybody can tell, the panelists here and myself, TEK kind of goes beyond like it's traditional understanding. It's just knowledge. Well, knowledge is great in academia. I have several high degrees. Everybody on this panel has years of experience, and almost everyone on this panel has more experience than I do. But it's also the application of that knowledge. TEK is a place-based knowledge. So for Buena Vista, we try and restore the knowledge of the place, of the village, of the rivers around us, and how we care for them and work with them. So that's kind of where tribal governments, at least the tribal government I work for, we try to articulate more than anything in any space, whether it's a historic archaeological site where we're articulating connections, or if we're consulting on a new dam project or any construction projects we're actively bringing TEK. James and I have spoken about this, as well as many elders who kind of say, well, it's not written down, it's not in any of the laws, but it really is everywhere. It's engaged with on every level of either tribal consultation, tribal articulation, tribal engagements. And it can be just a simple regulation in tribal law, or it can be kind of articulated in other ways. And that's kind of where I come from it in my daily work as a TIPO and as a cultural resource director. TEK is everywhere for me. I'm going to open it up now to the panel to kind of build off of what I spoke about in their own experiences. So anybody who wants to step up and speak, please do.
I guess I'll go next. So I guess, one of the things that I wanted to kind of like hit on, especially using TEK on, as far as for site protection, it's an everyday use. Any kind of determination that we make for any projects that we get that come across my desk, that's what we basically dive into to find out how sensitive the area is, especially, within the tribe's ancestral territory. So, we go through everything. We look through archaeological data. We look through interviews that we've had with, tribal elders, archival data, from a lot of the things from the universities that, we obtain going through talking about certain places, for gathering, hunting, those kind of things. One of the things I think is to remember, and what we usually try to make sure that especially when we're dealing with different agencies and even the local governments, is trying to get them to understand that basically everything that is out there and what we're using is not just the knowledge of that things that have been in the past, that things that we get from the past, that a lot of those same areas that are being used as gathering areas or hunting areas or areas of special significance to families are still being done today. It's not something that's of the past, it's something that's still happening today. I'm living in a community, or I live in a community that basically that we never stopped dancing and did ceremonies and, went out and gathered. We were fortunate enough to be able to, and not every community has. So, it makes it a little bit harder, but there is still that information that has all of that's there. And so they'll talk about places to be able to go and gather medicine or to pray, or certain places that, are of significance to even just certain families. And so all of that information is really important. And we incorporate that into any type of determination when, we get notifications on any job. So it's not something, and like I said, I always try to educate a lot of these agencies that we're dealing with, is that we're not just talking about something that's of the past. These practices are still being done today. This knowledge is still being passed down today. And so we use everything that we can at our disposal to make sure that we protect and preserve the tribe's cultural resources when dealing with any of that. So, it's out there. It's in, we use it for mapping. We use it for, it's in the language. We use archival material. Every type of, thing that we can use, any type of materials that we can use from, like I said, if it's interviews, if it's archaeological data, if it's language, because language even has things in it. Language will tell you about certain places. It'll tell you, just by the name of certain villages, what was abundant in that place. That might be the place of, the pepperwood trees or certain things. And so it's also in the language that is from the indigenous, the people that are from there. So understanding, what's in all of that information that's in it and how to use it. how to be able to help your community preserve, what's there, and also make, the understanding of, the other communities or the non-native communities understanding that we're still here, we exist, and those practices are still being done today. So.
Oh, I want to like go off of what you were talking about, Robert, a little bit, because I remember a conversation that you and I had about hot lava. You remember? Okay, that's a good laugh. I like seeing that because I think that's actually a perfect illustration of maybe not of tech, but certainly of what we're talking about. Because I think that with tech, I think our view, and when I say tech, again, traditional ecological knowledge, tech is, I think it's also felt here largely, but it's often this term that we utilize to make a point to agencies. You understand when we say it, traditional ecological knowledge, the agency kind of gets, or the person gets. So it's very like it's almost like utilizing a colonial term for like understanding like all the things that people just did, like in a lot of ways, and had done since time immemorial, that kind of thing. So I want to get back to that. So in terms of utilizing tech with government agencies, because I was just thinking a lot about like while you were talking about that, Robert, was we have, I think the Shingle Springs here, and I believe most tribes have this, is they get a ton of projects and tons of letters for Section 106 of National Historic Preservation Act. There's in California we have California Assembly Bill 52, California Senate Bill 18, and various other laws that require state agencies and federal agencies to interact with tribes, and often that interaction is sort of archaeologically based, or sort of they place, like, there's this one sphere where we're talking about old village sites as opposed to like landscapes and other things that are going on. So we're not talking, like, they separate all these things out. So we're just going to talk about the archaeological side. We're just going to talk about the plant side. We're just going to talk about the historic side. So all those things are separated out. And now to get to my hot lava story, me and Robert, we were talking about some project. I can't even remember like exactly like the details of it, but like the way that they were, and you'll tell me if I've got this wrong, Robert, is that the way that that particular agency was thinking about that site was really as if like the resources around it and all these other things around it were like not being utilized. So it was almost like and I think we were talking about the game Hot Lava, when like you're a little kid, you think of the ground as hot lava, so you like climb on the couches, you climb all over the room to not touch the hot lava on the ground. So it almost gave it like the agencies, the way that they were thinking about sort of like cultural resources, or like how all this played together, was like hot lava. Essentially, that community like essentially climbed the trees, and then like I don't know how the hell they got to whatever site on the like 2 miles away or what, because they didn't leave a presence there. It's like, no, they all that stuff is gone from the landscape, or you're thinking about it in different terms. So it becomes like this hot lava game where it's like, like you can't have these things touch. It's like, no, like the whole idea with tech, and I think with that I think agencies need to work on, and is that idea that it is far-reaching, and that it's a cultural landscape, or that all of these things are tied into one another. So it's not just that it's utilizing just plant materials to make something. It's also the language is also tied to tied to that place, that's also tied to that activity, that's tied to that space as well. There's ceremony that's also tied to those activities, those spaces, and that, you know, all of these things are tied to one another. So it becomes, you know, this, you know, this kind of this game of like hot lava. You know, I'm sort of using to illustrate this is that these things can't touch, and it's like, well, no, it's not that at all. It's, you know, there's this word that I'm like thinking of is tarak, is land, and it kind of means like everything that is like up above the ground that you can kind of see. It's not just like, it's not just the dirt, it's just kind of like the ability to like look up around you at everything else. And it's like really kind of cool to me to think about like that as like, it's not just like, it's just like everything that's here, everything that's part of that space, that's all of it, not just the dirt that we're talking about. So maybe that's a good way to have somebody segue into other thoughts. But I was just recalling that conversation we had like a long time ago, Robert. So please respond to it if you like, or just laugh. I like that too.
Well, thank you, James. Petee, do you have anything to add, or if you have cell reception? Well, from there, James kind of articulating what a lot of California tribes and historic preservation offices have to deal with is the federal government, when I say they, I generally mean the federal government and the state governments, to like to parse out and to put into these boxes of, well, this is archaeological, this is biological, this is water resources. And when those happen, they miss the connections of TEK. When I consult on any project or anything of that nature, I often take elders, I often take other community members out there with me. Sometimes I even bring youth out with me to show them, like, well, this is what it is beyond the city, this is what it is beyond the reservation, beyond anything else. This is where the sites are. This is where everybody's lived, because California has been inhabited for thousands of years, and all of those things are connected. One kind of pertinent idea that I've articulated to multiple state agencies at this point in this month alone is the Delta, the San Joaquin Sacramento Delta here is a massive resource. It is the largest delta in the Western Hemisphere, approximately. It is a huge resource, but it's been changed from the Spaniards and the missionary period all the way through Sutter and the establishment and the gold into contemporary days. So when I have to articulate the connections to a site, I often bring up those old Spanish maps, these older maps, those mapping software like Robert mentioned, and use those and articulate, well, this is the way we still think about it, where Indigenous people still articulate connections to this massive Thule land that stretched from, and if anybody's familiar with California or these older archival maps, and I'm wrong, please correct me. But from my understanding, they went from all the way from the Sutter Buttes all the way down to Tulare Lake. That's almost the entire Central Valley was a marsh, kind of salinity wetland that was engaged with. And that's how Indigenous people like Petee is today, consulting with projects, massive state projects, or even a small building project. And those are the kind of tools that we need to wrap up and re-articulate this kind of holistic knowledge that TEK is. That's my example, and I in all honesty, I use TEK almost every day in my work because I'm trying to reconnect those boxes of water was talking about, and kind of undo that kind of thought process, that thought pathway that a lot of Western science uses to categorize and build on these things. Language is a huge part. I haven't necessarily yet developed the TEK program to move towards language, but language is often critical, how people name and consider things. I'm going to hand it over to Robert to kind of articulate a little bit more about his language projects and how he uses those in his site collections and knowledge.
Okay, well, as far as I think with language, I mean, like I said, in each tribe is different, and each tribe's, their language, the way that it's set up, kind of like really kind of spells out. It has a lot more information than a lot of people realize. The information that will, be in your language, is the tribe's value system. If you go deep down and you dig into the language will tell you what you can and you can't do. The language will tell you certain aspects on how you look at things. For instance, from where I'm from, in the mountain itself is called Konaktai when you get here, but that mountain is actually only called Konaktai from the southern part of the lake, from the southeastern Pomo, where I'm from. From where my mother's from, she's from Eastern Pomo, which is from the northeast side. It's a different perspective. It's called something different. It's also, looked at, and even though the mountain's the same mountain, I mean, it holds a different meaning, and even in creation of stories and certain things that have happened to it. So, just for instance, the mountain itself in my language is called Konaktai. People know it as Konaktai, but it's called Konoktai. And what it means is old mountain women. Each peak is a mountain woman, older mountain woman at that. So it tells you, like in that language, or even in the language, it tells you that it's a woman. Both peaks are women, and they're elderly women, not just women in general, but they're elderly women, elders. And so it's things like that that are revealed, I think, when, you step back and you look at the language, like, yeah, I'm also from Alem. Alem only means to be half of something. And the reason why our village is called that, because our original place is actually an island. We come from, the southeastern Pomo are all tribes that came from islands. And so when the community started getting too big, they started moving over into the mainland. So Alem actually refers to it as, basically half on the island, and then the other half of Alem is on the mainland. So that just in general generalizes, like tells you, like, your language really kind of has that for you. And then even, when I do my introduction in the language and I say Alembuk, I'm telling you that I'm from Alem. In the English term, that's where I'm telling you I'm from Alem. But when you break my language down and you understand this, a lot of the possessives and those kind of things. So basically, if you were to look at how it's set up, it actually says that the land of Alem owns me. And it's a possession that can never be detached. It's almost like, if you cut your arm off and your arm gets detached from your body, it's still your arm. There's no disconnect, regardless of whatever it is. So it's that same possession that would happen with something like that is also when I say that I am from Alem, it means that the land of Alem owns me, that can never be disconnected regardless. So it's those values, it's that system that's also in the language that can help you understand really your connection. And, a lot of people don't really look into the language that deep and kind of look into these other things, I think, when it comes to, site protection, or even trying to reveal that connection that the community has to its Aboriginal territory. So I always tell everyone, go back and really try to dig deep into your language and start looking at some of the values that it has, some of the messages that it has within it, like what you can and that you can't do. Some of these things where you're supposed to go. We from where I'm from, there's where we actually, because it's matrilineal, that we actually own tracts of land that begin in the middle of the island and actually went out kind of like a spoke wheel. And tracts of land were owned by certain families through their mother's side, that you were always connected to that. And if you needed something in someone else's tract of land, then you traded for it. And that's how, you know, the community sustained each other, is to be able to have those things. And so it's really, you know, that traditional ecological knowledge is really, those are the important things to remember, to try to make sure that our community knows, because we're the ones that really have to educate the non-native communities about how the dynamics within our community works. The archaeologists, and I have to do this, you know, almost at a constant, is letting the agencies know the archaeologist is not the expert on me. I'm the expert on me. And so we're there to work in collaboration to really come up with a really good picture on, you know, the sensitivity of the site. But the archaeologist is not someone that really understands and really knows the ins and the outs and all the dynamics of my community. You know, they might have came a long time ago and taken some notes on certain questions that they asked, but not every aspect of you know, the communal, the tribal community life and how it goes. We're the experts on that, and we're constantly having to tell these agencies that, because we don't have the, you know, the PhDs or, you know, the you know, all the letters behind our name that they're looking for, who they take as the experts. But like I said, you know, it's just really trying to reiterate that, you know, Native people are the experts on themselves. And if you want to know something really detailed about, you know, the tribal, you know, community and the dynamics, you know, talk to somebody from the tribe. And like I said, you know, it's not putting down the archaeologists that are there, because I know they've done a lot of work and they, you know, they do a lot of research, but it's scientific research. If you want really, you know, the tech portion of it, go to the tribe. So.
Wonderful, thank you, Robert. And that kind of leads to the other, another avenue, and I see the one question in our chat, which kind of goes along with the new direction I'm taking it, is that when tribal governments work with it, tribes are often, if we remember back into our history and our formation and recognition of tribes, is that they're forced into these forms of government, these forms of knowledge, these forms of documentation, these forms of engagement. And so when TEK comes into a regulatory standpoint, writing policies for it is often difficult. If you research TEK policies, if you research TEK literature, there's tons of scientific articles, there's tons of regulations. We have 2 or 3 new regulation assembly bills coming here into effect in California that talk about TEK, but the lived experience and the practice of it on the land, kind of harkening back to, like James said, is like going back there to Scott Valley. And I know I did my master's thesis with part of James's community, so I know the region well. Is just going back to the community and working with them on those days, elders, engaging, learning those languages and what the language means. And all of that stuff does have to be taken and written into policy. But it's not one where you can sit down and just talk and come up like, oh, this is our overarching policy, this is our vision, this is our goal, and you have your product right there, your document. It's more of a sporadic, well, for Buena Vista, we gather tules. What do we need to gather tules? Like, what is the policies and the procedures? And that could be a week or a month of me sitting with the elders, talking to them of like, where did you go? Like, show me on a map, like, take me there. What is the actual practice? What is the documentation? What songs, what participation occur on these things? And TEK policy development in terms of land management does really have to be teased out ethnographically. And I love the older way of just sitting and listening to the elders, or going with them. And to kind of answer your question, Jonathan, of co-managing public lands, that's, from my experience, that's a relatively newer one where agencies are opening for their sustainability, their natural resources, because we also see a giant dynamic shift in quote unquote natural resource management, where they're starting to include traditional ecological knowledges, the practices of the land before the Western science came here. James looks like he's ready to correct me, and I'm 100% okay with that. But
I'm not going to correct you at all.
Like I said, I'm the younger here, and I'm always willing to learn, even in my position as a TIPO and my representative. We kind of have to eat that humble pie and listen when we're developing these TEK policies. I'm still in the midst of it. I'm 60 pages deep in a TEK policy for gatherings, for getting all the correct permits and documenting and talking about these with other land managers and having access. So Buena Vista really doesn't have any co-managed lands at this point. I don't know, Robert, James, do you guys have any experience with co-managing labs in TEK?
So I guess to think about it with, and this is the case with Shingle Springs at this point in terms of co-managing lands, right now, not directly co-managing lands, because we're often at the beginning of those conversations with different agencies such as Cal State Parks. I think that, and I'll talk about Cal State Parks actually a lot more in a second. Part of that is capacity, like thinking about what capacity a tribe actually has to be able to co-manage a land. So in terms, and management of a land is highly complex, because like if you think about like what practices that were done by people in the past and what has been done since you have colonization in the area and up until now. So like in California, we've had numerous forest fires, wildfires everywhere. And I think largely like what is happened is like in the past, there wasn't as much of that in the deep past because there was cultural burnings. There were other ways of managing the land that tribes did. And because the tribes did that, there wasn't this, it looks like there's not, because the tribes did that in the past, in terms of doing that now, those practices have been removed from the lands, and reintroducing those there's a lot of work that goes into like getting back to that space. So like interesting, like I was talking with a group today, and like they mentioned like, well, this is my 15-year plan, and it's like, well, yeah, that's basically you for that individual till retirement, and not necessarily up like past that. So like in terms of like talking about like management, we're always negotiating that, and talking about Cal State Parks specifically. So like Shingle Springs, the tribe here has a memorandum of understanding, or MOA with Cal State Parks, and part of that is not necessarily about co-management of a specific land. It really is about being able to get individuals and people who are practicing tech, and Petee is like out there in the field doing it right now, where it's stuff like it is getting access to those places. And that's where like we're starting with those MOUs and those abilities to get back onto the land, to be able to bring those practices back to the land, which the TEK program here has done a fantastic job. I wish I could say like I was doing it. No, I am not. This is like that whole department does such a fantastic job every day. And really, I like, it is part of the reason why I love working here so much, is that like being able to be a part of that is fantastic. So in terms of like I think a lot of tribes are at the beginning of that space of managing or co-managing lands, and working towards really trying to build those relationships with the different agencies. So in many cases, what that means as a tribal representative, we're looking to build memorandums of understanding or memorandums of agreement with those different agencies or local agencies as well as federal agencies to be able to manage the land, to be able to do things on the land that have long been out of practice. So I think I'll leave it there. And I know it looks like we have like 10 minutes left. Or
Perfect. So we're going to transition over to the question and answer section. Everybody, Jessica, do you want to host that, or how are we going to go about that?
I would be happy to facilitate the question and answer. Looks like we probably have time for a couple. The first one I'm seeing coming through our chat is, what are examples of co-managing public lands that would help your tribal communities sustain their traditional knowledge and practices? Coming from Jonathan Long. And I see that, Lara, you mentioned that you would like to answer this question live. Do you want to hop on and?
Oh, no, I was just queuing that. Sorry.
Okay, so we'll read it once again. What are examples of co-managing public lands that would help your tribal communities sustain their traditional knowledge and practices? From Jonathan Long.
I think that was one that we had just went through, right? Am I wrong?
We partially talked about that one. To sum up, James, and to bring in Buena Vista's perspective, is just access to the landscape. There's a lot of permitting processes. There's a lot of discussion processes. There's tribal members have to hold letters. And all of that just kind of like convolutes and makes it more difficult. And I see Petee's raising his hand to even talk about that one as well. So go ahead, Petee.
Yeah, I wanted to express about TEK, and to me personally, this has been one of the most rewarding jobs that I have been able to partake in. And you know, the way I actually came into the TEK department with Shingle Springs was that I was out there on sites that we only had court orders to get into, and a lot of people in our tribal communities know that when these private landowners take over their land, they don't allow us out there. They don't let us get out there, and unless we have a P number from the CRIS record, the CRIS is which the California Historic Resource Information Center or Services System. Unless we got records to prove that we've been out there, we don't get access to that. So with the TEK department and being out there on these sites, you know, I was out there doing it for free for my tribe, you know, and getting small contracts here and there to help sustain the gas and our daily life. But with Shingle Springs, they had seen that and it's like, hey, why don't you come over here and do this with us? And now I'm able to go out on site, you know, and help protect them, because our tribes were neighboring tribes. So where there's old sites, where there's old roundhouses that we couldn't get to, with being a site monitor or a cultural resource protector, you're able to get out there, you know, once, maybe twice, to be able to see what plants are still out there. See, you know, like our elderberries, the willows, sedge, different types of like mugwort. That's a really, really powerful medicine to us, to our people. And you know, when our archaeologist or biologist goes out there, they're like, well, there's not much native plants out here. And when we, you know, let them use our eyes to a certain extent and say, but look it, right on the other side of that, you know, right outside of your APE or outside of this area, there's tons of bay right there. There's tons of elderberry, you know, and we haven't been out here and those haven't been taken care of. And so that with this TEK department, it's really given us time to reconnect with the earth, give us time in our daily life to go out and gather where we wouldn't be able to if we were in different positions within the tribe or different jobs. You know, no job's gonna let you go out and gather medicine all day for the people. And that's where TEK comes in. You know, with the TEK department, they tell us we're getting low. You know, right now is the time of year we need to go get mugwort because this is the time, not because we have a couple of days free. No, this is the time of year you do it. And to me, that has been one of the most rewarding things of the TEK department, is that they allow us to do things that we're supposed to do, and you actually get paid to do it. So when I look at TEK, I think like this is a really good thing for all tribes to take and use in their own tribe, because this knowledge is knowledge that is almost lost to a certain extent. And if you weren't raised around it, or you weren't taking time to love that part of our culture, you know, it'll slip away. And so that's why I just really wanted to let people know that this TEK is the term TEK has given a gateway for us to continue doing stuff that we're just supposed to do. And it's hard to do because you have other stuff in life. So that's what I wanted to touch on. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Petee, for that. I think we probably have time for maybe one more question. Deb Carey asks, do the tribes have folks who are representatives or senators who can infiltrate the system? So I'm thinking a little bit more about kind of scaling up out of those local practices into, you know, institutionalizing this kind of thing. James, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll talk about the California context. So there's one of the things that you have in California is you have like tribal liaisons. So there are positions that are created within the numerous agencies within California that are those tribal liaison positions. So there are those kinds of spaces. It's really difficult to get tribal people into those spaces, just generally. Like, so I know that there's probably maybe a handful of people who are like that are tribal, that are like native Californian, that are in like Department of whatever. So I can only think of maybe like a handful of people who are maybe who are indigenous, that are indigenous in California that sit in those positions, but not like throughout all the numerous departments, which the state is now required to have a lot of those tribal representatives. The other side of that is in terms of representation. I mean, there are, again, sort of like a handful of legislators in California that are certainly on the tribe side. Also, like there are like a handful of individuals that are from tribal communities that are now starting to represent the local constituents. I think the one that I think of most is James Ramos. I know that he's done a lot of work down south, but he doesn't represent the communities up here. But he is certainly like him, as well as people like him, are voices in that body of government. We just don't have enough there. So I mean, I guess that's also a plug to like, hey, please, if you want to get out there and serve the community in that way, please do. And that's a lot of work.
Thank you so much. I think we're getting close to time, so I'm gonna call it there with the question and answer session. Thank you, panelists, so much for your insight and experience and dialogue. And thank you to everyone who put questions in the chat and are, you know, actively engaging with this conversation. So I really appreciate you taking the time. Ivan, is there anything that you'd like to add before we sign off?
No, I just wanted to thank everybody who attended this, especially my three panelists. You guys were absolutely wonderful. I'll see you all and talk to you all soon. And everybody who kind of attended, I tried to answer as many of the questions in the Q&A chat with messages. But they're like, TEK is just getting started. And it's been a long time coming. There's multiple venues into it. There's multiple ways you can apply software or skill sets with tribal governments. And I just wanted to thank everybody for their interest and participation. And I truly hope every single one of you engages in TEK in some way in the future. I'd be happy to see all 163 people here. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, everyone. So we're going to be transitioning on to our next session. We have about a 5-minute break. So if you need to stretch your legs, get some more water, or just take an intentional moment to reflect on much of the wisdom that was just shared with us, especially the importance of listening to tribes and thinking about who is considered an expert on traditional ecological knowledge and the intersections of TEK with language and the need for access to landscapes. And there was just so many thoughts and knowledge is shared here today during this panel. So as we take the next 5 minutes to transition to our next session, please just reflect on these moments. And thank you so much to all of our panelists for the session. We appreciate your time.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks.